My name is Grant Grierson and I wish to talk to you about differentiated professional development today. Now, in order for me to talk to you about differentiated professional development, I do need to make it in reference to a school. So for today, I will be addressing the issues surrounding the current professional development model of a private school found on the Gold Coast. For the purpose of this presentation, I will be referring to the school as School X. The problems with School X is that the current model for professional development focuses entirely on a passive learning model. Currently, professional development is held on Mondays from 3:30 to 4 and on Wednesdays from 3:30 to 4:45 p.m. Wednesday's PD is whole school PD, whilst Monday's PD is a faculty checkup due to time restraints. Staff are signed off at the entrance to PD and are sat in rows as the professional development is delivered in a lecture style. These professional development sessions are delivered to the entire faculty and there is no follow-up to these professional development lectures. This current model identifies 4 out of the 5 problems identified by Rocker in 2018. Those being the adaptation of a passive learner model, the lack of differentiation between PD, the fact that there is no reflecting on practice, and there is no ongoing support following the conclusion of the PD. It is as such that these will be investigated further today. Cutler addresses the passive learner model as a presentation delivered as a lecture devoid of audience involvement aside from handouts. This is very much emulated in School X. This blanket style approach to presenting PD allows admin to check off any and all PD requirements, however does little to allow for cognition. For instance, PD is held after school and does little to recognize a teacher's workload and whether or not they have been overworked that day. It also disregards a teacher's experience with that topic being delivered for PD, as well as the relevance of what that PD might be to that teacher. An example might be teaching school policy to the staff with a teacher who has been at the school and is well aware of the policy because they've been there for the past decade. Malcolm Knowles presents the notion of andragogy and identifies that it has its own challenges. He states that adults need to know why they need to know something. Furthermore, they need to learn experimentally, essentially addressing the topic as problem solving. The topic should also be presented and shown to have immediate value to the teacher. Dinham 2016 identifies the link between Knowles' work and that of a study done by Durham University and their findings on the 6 components of great teaching. The university found that there was strong evidence to support the theory that the quality of instruction influenced outcomes greatly. So how can we change this passive model? Lally and Miller in 2007 presented the idea of the learning pyramid. The learning pyramid shows an estimate of retention rates of current teaching methods. Now, taking into the assumption that these teaching methods are also being taught to andragogy, one can see that the current passive model of School X is generating only about 5% retention. This is due to the fact that most of these PDs are being delivered as lectures. That being said, if those lectures happen to include a reading dynamic, so a handout of some variety, the retention for that PD would only be as high as 10%. To improve this current model, the school will have to adapt professional development to include group discussions, the practice of topics, and the teaching of others. This process of having communications with others lends to the concepts that Helen Tipperley introduces in effective professional conversations. By having these conversations with other educators, you could see retention rates increase up to 50%. However, adopting the model would require the school to consider the individual learner and dismiss the blanket style approach for the whole academic cohort. For this, it will need to differentiate the PD process. Peter Senge asks, how do we tap into people's commitment and capacity to learn at all levels? Whilst Bloom's taxonomy would highlight the importance of differentiated learning, Senge's answer to this was to redefine a school as a learning organization where all entities become learners, essentially establishing the institution as a professional learning community. Stoll highlights the importance of a school to focus on the individual and not the group. In order for this to take place, critical analysis of individual learners will be required from the school in order for more effective PD to be delivered. This critical analysis can be done by either the individual or under the guidance of a mentor or a head of department. An alternative would be to establish PLC groups within the school and allow for the analysis to be done through these groups. The fostering of a PLC within the school could thereby target the individual's needs instead of the groups, and therefore address any concerns. Hargreaves and Fullen in 2000 state that in their paper about mentoring for the new millennium, that moving from one-on-one mentorship to a community mentorship could show great success in the functionality of a PLC. The idea of having experts in various fields acting as mentors to teachers could allow further support to teachers beyond PD sessions and essentially encourage more effective professional conversations within the school community. Kane and Kane in 2010 presented a model for what a PLC should look like. This model highlights the importance of observation, rotating of leadership, critical analysis of oneself, application of topics, and reflection. By adopting this method of delivering PD, the school could meet the demand of the participatory teaching methods that Lally and Miller introduce in the learning pyramid, thereby allowing for higher retention of PD topics. This, however, does rely heavily on the teacher's ability to critically analyze themselves and be proactive in seeking out PD that addresses weaknesses in their teaching. We talks to the 5 requirements of an empowered, effective teacher. Number 1, identifying weaknesses and PD needs to be essential. Number 2, personalizing a PD plan either through the help of your PLC or a mentor needs to be undertaken. Number 3, creating a plan with a faculty advisor or a head of learning is essential to encourage further learning. Number 4, establishing checkup meetings to monitor practice and implementation of strategies. Number 5, allowing for observations of practice. In fact, the Australian Professional Teaching Standards introduced by ATSL in 2014 are great models that assist with pre-service teachers. During this time, pre-service teachers are given guidance and support in the form of constant reflection on practice and mentorship. Furthermore, most schools establish pre-service programs to moderate the teacher's success over the years. In this regard, most of these schools ensure that pre-service teachers become empowered, effective teachers, as shown here by WE in 2018. However, after becoming a proficient teacher, the teacher's proficiency is assumed and therefore not checked again for another 5 years. This assumption of proficiency will see a school not offer the guidance and support previously offered to the teacher, essentially leaving them to their own practice, as is the case in School X. This brings up the issue of support. Ed Surge in 2019 offers professional learning cycles as an alternative to professional learning communities. This cycle involves 4 steps and sees the learner taking the active steps to ensure that they are getting the support they need. Engaging in professional conversations should be the starting point for all of these cycles and reflects well with the suggestions of Helen Timperley. By engaging in these conversations, one can get the support either online or through colleagues within their staff room. The next step would be to become an active learner. This is essential for the individual learner to access their weaknesses and engage in resources beyond their collegial circle. These alternative PDs can be found anywhere, through programs online, through observations of YouTube materials. Essentially, it is getting active within that community outside of their learning cycle. This self-help method, however, does have its limitations and does require an individual to seek out support, either a mentor or head of department needs to be included within this adaptation. Lastly, the individual should measure the success or failure of what they have learned, either by adapting or modifying it in their classroom, but mostly they should share it with their collegial circle. This method of self-support further highlights the significance of establishing a professional learning community. In conclusion, the old model of delivering PD to the passive learner is no longer effective in today's society. Differentiating andragogy is as important as differentiating pedagogy. Fostering a reflected and supportive community within the school could see an increase in effective PD and subsequent student outcomes, thereby correcting the current model being delivered by School X. I want to thank you for listening to me today,